I've always believed it's the little gestures that keep love alive. A quick, thinking of you text. A surprise call just to see his face. So when Ethan told me he was away on a business trip, I thought, why not brighten his day? I dialed without hesitation, expecting that familiar, tired smile he always gave me after long meetings. But the second he answered, I saw it. A flicker of panic in his eyes, a startled pause. For a split second, he looked like a man caught off guard, as if he'd been expecting anyone but me. He quickly switched gears, flashing the smile I'd fallen in love with years ago. Polished, practiced, almost too perfect. Hey, sweetheart, he said, his voice cheerful, maybe a little forced. He launched into his usual routine, meetings, presentations, endless chatter about work. I wanted to believe him, to let his words wash over me like they always had. But something in his tone felt rushed, clipped, like he was racing me through a story he didn't want to tell. And even through the screen, I could feel the strain in his performance. So I played along, nodding, smiling, telling him about my day at home. The plants I watered, the neighbor I chatted with, the tiny details of a life I thought we shared. But my gut was already stirring. That quiet, unmistakable whisper every woman knows too well. Something was wrong. My eyes wandered past his smile, past the blur of his hotel room, and then I saw it. In the corner of the screen, the mirror gave him away. A reflection. A woman's hand, adjusting her hair. Not mine. My heart skipped, but my face didn't flinch. I kept my smile steady, my voice calm, as if nothing at all had happened. He didn't notice the shift in me, or maybe he was too busy keeping up his act to catch it. I asked him about his dinner plans, about how long the conference would keep him busy, letting the words tumble out as though I cared more about the details than the truth screaming at me from that reflection. All the while, I was measuring every flick of his eyes, every pause that stretched just a little too long. Inside, though, I was unraveling. A part of me wanted to freeze the screen, shove it in his face, and demand answers right then and there. But another part, the stronger part, told me to hold it in. Don't let him see you break. Don't let him see you know. That thought wrapped around me like armor, and I clung to it. Rage was bubbling, yes, but beneath it was something colder. Resolve. I wasn't just his wife in that moment. I was the woman who had just glimpsed the crack in his perfect facade. I asked him about the view from his hotel room, forcing my voice into a playful tone. He turned the camera a bit, showing me curtains, a desk, anything but the mirror behind him. That alone told me more than any confession could. My pulse was steady now, my breathing measured. He thought he was fooling me. Thought this call was just another small test of his charm. But I had seen enough. And once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. I let him talk, letting his words fill the silence while my mind spun in 100 directions. He told me about the people he'd met, the long sessions, even joked about how boring some of the speakers were. I laughed in all the right places, played the role of the supportive wife, the role I'd mastered over the years. But now, every sound, every word, every glance felt like a piece of evidence, and I was collecting them quietly, carefully. The strangest part was how normal everything looked if you didn't know where to focus. To anyone else, it was just a husband and wife chatting over a video call, smiling and catching up. But I wasn't anyone else. I was the woman who noticed the way his shoulders tensed when I asked simple questions. I was the woman who saw a stranger's silhouette moving in the background of a life that was supposed to be ours alone. When he finally said he had to go, that he was running late for another meeting, I nodded sweetly, told him I loved him, and wished him luck. My voice was steady, my smile convincing. He hung up, none the wiser. But as the screen went black, I felt the weight of the truth pressing down on me. I didn't just see a reflection. I saw my marriage reflected back at me, cracked, tainted, already breaking. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The moment the call ended, I just sat there, staring at my phone like it might suddenly explain everything. My hands were steady, but inside, I felt like I'd been split open. Rage rushed through me, hot and sharp, but it was tangled with heartbreak so deep it almost stole my breath. Betrayal isn't loud, it's quiet, like the slow crack of glass before it shatters. And in that silence, I felt myself slipping into a place I hadn't been in years, the edge of breaking. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to call him back and shout the truth into his smug little smile. But instead, I whispered 3 words I didn't mean. I love you. It was easier to end it on my terms, not his. I needed him to believe I was blind, that I hadn't seen the ghost of another woman haunting his hotel room. Let him think he still had control. That was the first gift I gave myself. The power to choose when and how this story would unravel. So I sat there in my living room, the glow of the screen fading, the quiet pressing in on me. The house felt different now, colder, almost foreign. Every photo on the wall, every piece of furniture we'd chosen together suddenly looked like props in a play I hadn't realized I was part of. I pressed my hands into my lap, grounding myself. If he thought I was going to storm, cry, and crumble right away, he was wrong. This wasn't going to end with me in pieces. No, this was just the start of something else. I kept replaying the call in my mind, every flicker of his eyes, every pause in his voice. The reflection in that mirror wasn't a mistake. It was the truth bleeding through the lies. My stomach tightened as if I'd swallowed a stone, heavy and unmoving. I thought about the years I'd spent trusting him, the countless times I defended his late nights, his trips, his excuses, and now, all those moments stacked up in my chest like proof I had ignored for far too long. The anger came in waves, but so did the grief. It was like losing something I hadn't realized was already gone. I remembered our wedding day, his hand trembling as he slid the ring onto my finger. I remembered the promises, the whispered forevers, and wondered if they ever meant as much to him as they did to me. Betrayal has a way of rewriting history, doesn't it? Suddenly, the sweetest memories turn sour, and the man you thought you knew feels like a stranger who's been living in your house. But instead of letting the pain drown me, I clung to clarity. I wasn't going to confront him yet. No, that would give him the chance to twist it, to deny, to paint me as the jealous wife imagining shadows. He was good at that, at spinning words until you questioned your own eyes. Not this time. I decided right then. I'd gather proof. Solid, undeniable proof. And when the time came, he wouldn't be able to hide behind his lies anymore. I closed my eyes and leaned back into the sofa, feeling the weight of it all press against me. The house was silent, but inside my head there was a storm. My mind kept circling back to that reflection. A stranger's hand moving with the ease of someone who didn't think twice about being there. She wasn't hiding. She didn't need to. That told me everything. She wasn't a mistake. She was a pattern. And Ethan had grown comfortable enough to let her slip into his world. I could almost hear his voice from the call, that cheerful tone covering cracks he didn't know were showing. I thought about how many times he'd looked at me with that same smile, spinning the same lies, and how easily I had let myself believe. It hurt. God, it hurt. But the pain was shifting into something else, something steadier. A quiet strength that whispered, "You know now, and you'll decide what happens next." That whisper was louder than my heartbreak. So I pulled myself up, straightened my shoulders, and made a choice. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of my tears, not yet. If he thought he was still in control, he was about to learn otherwise. I'd let him play his game a little longer, but this time, I'd be watching every move. And while he thought he was fooling me, I'd be building the truth brick by brick, until the moment I was ready to knock his entire world down. The first thing I did was replay that call, over and over, like a detective reviewing evidence. I zoomed in on the mirror, paused on the moment her hand brushed through her hair. My heart sank each time, but oddly enough, it also steadied me. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined it. That reflection was real, and with every replay, it became the anchor to remind me I wasn't losing my mind. He was the one slipping, not me. I started digging where I knew he'd never expect me to look. His credit card statements, for one. Little breadcrumbs of dinners for two. Charges at hotels that didn't line up with his so-called meetings. It was almost insulting. How careless he'd been. Each discovery hurt, but it also fueled me. Every receipt, every timestamp was like a piece of a puzzle he thought I'd never bother to solve. But I was solving it, slowly, meticulously, one clue at a time. The more I uncovered, the more the past came rushing back to me in fragments. That handbag I'd once glimpsed on a chair in the background of his call. I had brushed it off. That faint laugh I'd heard, which he dismissed as the TV. I had believed him. Now each memory felt like a breadcrumb I had ignored, each excuse I had swallowed. And here I was, gathering them all, lining them up, finally seeing the picture for what it really was. I became a quiet shadow in my own marriage, smiling at him during calls, listening to his stories, while behind the scenes I was piecing everything together. I dug through travel confirmations in his email, hotel reservations that didn't quite match the dates he gave me. The lies were stacked so neatly, like a house of cards waiting for the right gust of wind. And every time I uncovered another inconsistency, I felt less broken and more prepared. But with every discovery came a sting I couldn't ignore. Nights where he had sworn he was working late, I found dinner charges for two. Times he said he was exhausted in his hotel room, there were spa receipts charged under his name. It was like peeling back layers of my own life, realizing I had been living with a stranger who played husband only when it suited him. The man I thought I knew was fading, replaced by the version I now saw in cold numbers and paper trails. Still, I didn't let myself spiral. Instead, I treated it like strategy. I was gathering proof, not just for me, but for the moment he would have no way out. He wouldn't get the chance to twist my words or gaslight me into questioning my sanity. This time, the evidence would speak louder than his charm ever could. And quietly, behind closed doors, I was turning into the one holding all the cards. The more I uncovered, the sharper my vision became. I wasn't just looking at the present anymore. I was revisiting the past with new eyes. That time he muted our call for room service, I remembered faint giggles in the background. The quick moment when his camera shifted and I caught the corner of a woman's scarf draped over a chair. I had dismissed it then, convincing myself I was imagining things. Now, each of those fragments lined up perfectly, like pieces I had refused to see before. It wasn't just betrayal I was staring at. It was a map of his choices, bold and reckless. And the cruelest part? He had underestimated me. He thought I'd keep my head down, keep playing the role of the trusting wife, too naive to connect the dots. But every overlooked detail, every hidden slip, now belonged to me. I held them tightly, not as wounds anymore, but as weapons I was preparing to use. One truth became crystal clear. I didn't just know he was cheating. I knew how, when, and with whom. And that gave me a power he could never take back. The silence he mistook for ignorance was becoming my strategy. He thought he was building a double life, but really, he was building the stage where his lies would collapse. And I was already planning how to pull the curtain back. The turning point came when I decided to stop being just the observer. Watching him lie was one thing, but exposing him, that was going to be mine. I called his office under the guise of being the supportive wife, asking about his schedule. That's when I learned the truth. His so-called business trip wasn't across the country. It was a simple conference, just a few hours away. The betrayal cut deeper knowing how close he really was, spinning his fantasy just down the road. I didn't cry this time. Instead, I smiled, almost amused. He thought he was clever, but I had just unlocked the door to his entire game. So I packed a bag, booked a room at the very same hotel he was staying in, and drove there in silence. The highway stretched out in front of me, a ribbon of possibility, and with every mile I felt less like the wounded wife and more like the architect of his downfall. Walking into that hotel felt like stepping onto a stage I had been preparing for all along. The air smelled faintly of perfume and polished wood, the kind of place designed for appearances. I checked in calmly, my voice steady, my smile polite. He had no idea I was there, no idea that his double life was about to collide with reality. And while he played husband to one woman, I was already setting the trap that would leave him exposed to everyone. That evening, I put my plan into motion. I reached out to a few of his colleagues, framing it as a thoughtful gesture. "Let's surprise Ethan," I said warmly. "He's been working so hard. A dinner to celebrate his success would mean the world to him." They agreed without hesitation, charmed by the idea. And just like that, the pieces fell into place. He thought he was the one staging his life, but now I was directing the scene. As I arranged the dinner reservation, a strange calmness settled over me. There was no shaking, no second-guessing. Just a clear, unwavering focus. I could picture his face when he walked into that room, expecting one reality, but finding another waiting for him. It was almost poetic. The lies he built so carelessly were about to crumble in front of the very people whose respect he thrived on. Back in my hotel room, I stood by the window overlooking the city lights. They flickered like little warnings, or maybe little promises. I thought of the woman in the mirror, the mistress who had unknowingly handed me the truth. If she showed up tonight, she'd learn the role she truly played in his story. And Ethan, well, he was about to find out what happens when you mistake silence for weakness. The night of the dinner, I arrived early, choosing a seat where I could see the entrance clearly. My heart was steady, my breathing slow, though underneath it all was a current of fire. One by one, his colleagues appeared, cheerful and unsuspecting, greeting me warmly as if this really were a celebration. They didn't know the truth yet, but they would. I smiled, offered polite conversation, and waited for the moment I had been building toward. Then, like a scene unfolding exactly as I had envisioned, he walked in. Ethan, confident as ever, wearing that same polished smile he had used to fool me. But this time, he wasn't alone. On his arm was the reflection I'd seen, her presence undeniable, her hand tucked into his like it belonged there. For a second, I almost laughed. He thought he was in control, strutting into that room like the star of his own show. What he didn't realize was that the spotlight had already shifted. Every eye turned to him, expecting joy, expecting a surprise in his honor. And instead, what they were about to witness was the unraveling of his carefully crafted image. I leaned back in my chair, calm and collected, ready to let the truth play out in front of the very people whose opinions mattered most to him. The trap was set, and he had walked straight into it. The room fell silent the moment they realized who I was. A wife, sitting calmly at a dinner arranged in her husband's honor, with his mistress standing right beside him. I saw the flicker in Ethan's eyes, confusion first, then dread creeping in like a shadow. He tried to mask it with that same grin, but this time it cracked at the edges. He knew. He knew before I even spoke that the ground beneath him was about to give way. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Instead, I stood slowly, meeting each pair of eyes in that room, letting the silence stretch until it felt heavy, undeniable. Then I picked up the remote and pressed play. On the screen behind me, the video call flickered to life. Ethan's face, smiling, lying, and just behind him, the reflection. her hand, her hair. The truth he thought he'd hidden. The collective gasp that followed was almost like music. Ethan stumbled for words, his mouth opening and closing, desperate to find an excuse. But excuses don't hold when the evidence stares back at you in front of your colleagues, your boss, your lover. The woman slipped her hand out of his arm, her face pale, her eyes darting toward the exit. She hadn't signed up for this part of his performance, and suddenly, he was standing alone, stripped of the illusion he had so carefully woven. I didn't look at him as he fumbled. I looked at them, his colleagues, the people who once admired him. Their faces told the whole story. Shock, disappointment, disgust. His boss shifted uncomfortably, clearly calculating what this meant for Ethan's credibility, for the company's image. And in that moment, I realized I didn't need to say much at all. The truth was already speaking louder than I ever could. Still, I couldn't resist twisting the knife just a little. "This," I said softly, gesturing toward the screen, "is the man who promised me loyalty. The man who told me he was here on business." My voice didn't shake. It was steady, calm, almost too calm. That was what made it sting more. Rage would have given him an opening to dismiss me. Calm made my words undeniable. Calm turned them into fact. Ethan reached out a hand toward me, muttering, "Karen, please, let's talk about this." I almost laughed. Talk? After all the lies? After all the secrets? No, talking wasn't going to save him. He had already lost. And with every second of silence that followed, the weight of his betrayal settled deeper on his shoulders. The man who thrived on control now stood stripped of it, naked in his own shame. I picked up my bag, slow and deliberate, like a woman leaving a meeting she'd already won. My dignity wasn't just intact, it was untouchable. While Ethan stood there drowning in whispers, I walked past him without so much as a glance. The mistress was already gone, slipping out like a shadow. His colleagues avoided his eyes, their silence louder than any condemnation. And his boss? He simply shook his head. Ethan's kingdom was crumbling in real time. But what none of them knew was that my revenge didn't end in that room. Before I even set foot in this hotel, I had already moved the money, secured the accounts, and signed the papers. Divorce wasn't a threat. It was a reality waiting at home. He hadn't just lost me that night. He had lost everything he thought defined him. Respect, reputation, stability. And all it took was one reflection to strip it away. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt lighter than I had in years. My heart wasn't broken anymore. It was free. The truth was out, and the shame was his to carry, not mine. I whispered to myself, almost smiling. One reflection showed me everything. And now, that's all he'll ever be. A man exposed by what he couldn't hide. And with that, I walked away, never looking back.
I was 16 when I discovered my father's true feelings about my future at Nakamura Technologies. "She's brilliant with code, Hideo," my mother said, her voice drifting up from the study. "Olivia's teacher says she's never seen anyone her age understand neural networks so intuitively." My father's response was immediate and dismissive. "It doesn't matter. The company goes to Daniel. The Nakamura name stays with the son." I stood frozen in the hallway, my laptop clutched against my chest, the AI project I'd been eager to show him suddenly feeling childish and irrelevant. Daniel, my brother, 3 years older, charming and utterly disinterested in the technology that had been my obsession since I was 8. The boy who'd barely passed his computer science classes but wore the right face, the right name, the right gender to inherit a tech empire. "But Olivia is," my mother began. "It's tradition," my father interrupted. "Women don't run tech companies. Not in Japan, not here. She'd be eaten alive." I slipped away before they could discover me, retreating to my bedroom where lines of code blurred through my tears. That night, I made a promise to myself. If I couldn't inherit Nakamura Technologies, I would build something even greater. and I would do it on my own terms. 13 years later, I stood in my brother's office, our father's old office, watching Daniel sign the termination papers with the same Mont Blanc pen our father had used to sign his Harvard tuition checks. Nothing personal, Liv, Daniel said, sliding the documents across his immaculate desk. But your department's performance metrics don't justify its existence anymore. I kept my expression neutral, though inside I was cataloguing every sacrifice that had led to this moment. The MIT PhD in Artificial Intelligence, completed in record time. The 7 patents I developed for Nakamura Technologies. The AI-driven security system that had saved the company $30 million last year alone. None of it mattered. I had the wrong name on my birth certificate. The board thinks we should focus on hardware, not your pet AI projects, Daniel continued, already turning his attention to his phone. Maybe start a cute little consulting business, something less technical. I signed the papers without comment, remembering the day 3 years ago when our father died, and the board, composed largely of his golf partners and college friends, unanimously voted Daniel as CEO, despite my detailed 5-year strategic plan for the company's future. Clear out your office by end of day, Daniel added, not bothering to look up from his screen. And Olivia? The tech world is brutal. This is for the best, really. I walked out with my head high, past employees who averted their eyes, past the AI labs where my team worked on innovations Daniel couldn't begin to comprehend. In my office, mine for the next few hours, I methodically packed 8 years of work, research papers, awards from tech conferences, the framed photo of me with Dr. Hinton at the Toronto AI Summit. At the bottom of my desk drawer, I found a thumb drive labeled Prometheus that made me smile for the first time that day. Daniel had always been so focused on the public-facing AI applications we developed, the virtual assistants, the security protocols, the consumer products, that he completely overlooked the true potential of my research. A shadow fell across my doorway. Elena Chen, my brilliant lead researcher, stood there, her expression a mixture of anger and resolve. So it's true, she said quietly. The board actually approved this. I nodded, sliding the thumb drive into my pocket. Unanimously. What will you do? Remember the conversation we had last month? About starting our own AI research company? Her eyes widened slightly. The one where you mentioned having your trust fund converted to venture capital. I pulled up an email draft I prepared weeks ago when the whispers about department restructuring first reached me. How would you like to be Chief Research Officer at Athena Intelligence? Fully funded, ready to start operations immediately. Alina stared at the business plan attached to the email, comprehension dawning on her face. You've been planning this. For years, I admitted. Why fight for a seat at their table when I can build my own? Over the next 3 hours, more of my team filtered through my office. Raj from Data Analytics passed over for promotion in favor of Daniel's fraternity brother. Minji from Neural Engineering, whose groundbreaking research Daniel had dismissed as too theoretical. One by one, they accepted positions at Athena Intelligence. By the time security arrived to escort me out, carrying my box of personal items, my new company had a core team of 12. The best minds from Nakamura's AI division. Daniel called from the executive lobby as I waited for the car I'd ordered. Don't take it personally, Liv. Some people just aren't cut out for the tech industry. I smiled, knowing it would infuriate him. Goodbye, Daniel. Give my regards to the board while they still answer your calls. The confusion on his face was worth every moment of humiliation I'd endured. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by whiteboards covered in algorithms and business strategies. My phone buzzed. Abigail Wong, CTO of Vertigo Systems, confirming our Monday meeting. I looked at the old family photo on my desk. Father standing proudly next to Daniel, his hand on his son's shoulder, while I stood slightly apart, always at the periphery of the frame. Women don't run tech companies, my father had said. He was right about one thing. I wouldn't be running just any tech company. I'd be creating the future he couldn't imagine. Monday morning arrived with a series of increasingly panicked texts from Daniel, which I ignored in favor of preparing for my meeting with Vertigo Systems. The conference room I'd rented for the occasion, Athena Intelligence's offices were still being renovated, felt appropriately imposing with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking San Francisco Bay. This is remarkable, Abigail said, studying the neural architecture diagrams I presented. a truly adaptive AI security system that evolves alongside potential threats rather than merely responding to them. The same system I proposed to Nakamura's board last quarter, I noted. They dismissed it as too experimental and fiscally irresponsible. Their loss, our gain, Abigail replied, signing the partnership agreement with a flourish. Vertigo Systems is proud to be Athena Intelligence's first enterprise client. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen to see Daniel's name, but returned the device to my pocket. I had 3 more meetings scheduled that day with companies eager to implement adaptive AI security solutions. By Wednesday, we'd secured partnerships with 4 major tech firms. Thursday, we announced our first round of funding, $50 million led by Takeda Ventures, a Japanese investment firm known for backing innovative AI startups. Friday morning, Nakamura Technologies stock dropped 12% after analysts questioned the company's competitive edge in the AI security market. Daniels called 6 times today, Elena reported, handing me a coffee as we reviewed designs for our new research facility. Apparently, Vertigo Systems just canceled their contract with Nakamura. Did they? How unfortunate. He left a message saying their legal department is exploring options regarding your non-compete clause. I smiled. They can explore all they want. I never signed one. It was true. In his arrogance, Daniel had never considered that his academically minded sister might pose a competitive threat. The oversight would cost him dearly. The following weeks unfolded with precise, calculated efficiency. Every client Nakamura approached for AI security solutions, we offered a more advanced alternative. Every researcher they attempted to recruit, we outbid them. Every press release they issued about future innovations, we countered with actual deployable technology. We weren't just competing with Nakamura, we were systematically dismantling their relevance in the AI sector. Then came the call I'd been anticipating. Olivia, my mother's voice was strained. We need to talk. I leaned back in my chair, gazing out at the view from Athena's new headquarters. About what, Mom? Nakamura Technologies or Athena Intelligence, because only one of them has a future in artificial intelligence. A pause. Your father, he never meant to dismiss every idea I ever had. To hand the company to Daniel simply because he was a man. To let him run our family legacy into the ground while ignoring every warning sign. More silence, then softly. The board meeting is tomorrow. Daniel, he's going to lose his position. The shareholders are furious about the Vertigo contract and the stock decline. I almost laughed. Sounds like an executive problem. Nothing to do with me. Please, Olivia, he's your brother. Funny, he wasn't my brother when he was firing me and mocking my research. I ended the call, feeling no regret, only a calm certainty about my next move. Tomorrow's board meeting wouldn't just mark my victory, it would determine whether I settled for winning or claimed total dominance in the AI security sector. I picked up my phone. Abigail, remember that integration framework we discussed? Move up the announcement to 9 a.m. tomorrow, and make sure to mention the exclusivity clause. The next morning, I watched Nakamura's emergency board meeting via video link, a simple arrangement when you've designed most of a company's security architecture. Daniel looked terrible, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, dark circles under his eyes as he tried to explain Nakamura's 35% drop in value over the past month. We're exploring alternative AI security partnerships, he stammered, reaching out to startups with promising technologies. There are no alternative partnerships, interrupted Yoshiko Takeda, who had recently acquired a significant stake in Nakamura. Athena Intelligence has exclusive contracts with every major player in the market. They just announced a $200 million integration framework that makes their technology the industry standard. Daniel tugged at his collar. Perhaps we could reach out to Athena, try to negotiate. The boardroom door opened. Now you want to negotiate? Every head turned as I stepped inside, my Athena Intelligence ID badge gleaming against my charcoal suit. Olivia, my mother half rose from her chair. What are you doing here? I smiled, representing the only company in this room with a viable future in artificial intelligence. Daniel's face darkened. You planned this. You deliberately sabotaged Nakamura? No, Daniel, I interrupted calmly. I built something better. Something Nakamura could have owned if you hadn't been so convinced that my research was worthless and women don't belong in tech leadership. I laid out my offer. Athena would acquire Nakamura Technologies. We would preserve the Nakamura name on specific hardware lines, retain most employees, and ensure the company's legacy continued, just not under Daniel's leadership. All in favor? Yoshiko Takeda asked, her expression inscrutable. The vote was nearly unanimous. Even my mother, looking resigned and somehow relieved, raised her hand. Daniel lurched to his feet. This isn't right. Mom, tell them. It's over, Daniel, she said quietly. We should have listened to Olivia years ago. I gathered my materials, preparing to leave, but paused at the door. Oh, and Daniel, don't bother cleaning out your office. I had it cleared this morning. Try not to feel too bad. Some people just aren't cut out for the tech industry. His own words thrown back at him. The perfect conclusion to a plan years in the making. That evening, I sat in my office at Athena headquarters, contemplating the acquisition documents. Nakamura Technologies, the company my grandfather had founded, the empire my father had expanded, the legacy that should have been mine from the beginning, was now under my control. Elena appeared in the doorway. Your mother is here. She looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow. Her usual perfect composure was fractured, revealing the weight of the day's events. The company your grandfather built is in good hands, she said, settling into the chair opposite my desk. No thanks to our short-sightedness. You mean father's short-sightedness, I corrected, and Daniel's arrogance. She shook her head. I share the blame. I should have fought harder for you, Olivia. I saw your potential. I knew you were the future of Nakamura, but I deferred to tradition. I studied her, searching for insincerity but finding only regret. Well, I said finally, at least now you know better. She nodded, then hesitated. That's actually why I came. There's someone I'd like you to meet. My assistant showed it a young woman, barely 20, I guessed, clutching a tablet to her chest, her eyes wide with barely contained excitement. Olivia, this is Sophia Murakami, my mother said. A quantum computing prodigy from Caltech. Her algorithms for quantum neural networks are, well, I think you should see for yourself. I raised an eyebrow. And why are you bringing her to me? My mother actually looked embarrassed. Because when I saw her work, I remembered all of your research that we dismissed. I didn't want to make the same mistake twice. Sophia nervously offered her tablet. Dr. Nakamura said you might be interested in my approach to quantum entanglement for secure AI communications. I accepted the device, scanning through her work with growing interest. These are impressive models. But tell me about yourself first, not your degrees or accolades. Tell me your vision for quantum AI. Her eyes lit up as she launched into an explanation, her initial nervousness giving way to passionate expertise. I caught my mother watching us, something like pride mingled with regret on her face. Later that evening, after offering Sophia a research position at Athena, I found a package on my desk with a note from my mother. Inside was my father's Mont Blanc pen, the same one Daniel had used to sign my termination papers. Asterisk, this belongs with the true future of our family's legacy, asterisk. I set the pen aside and returned to reviewing Sophia's quantum algorithms, a smile playing at my lips. There was still work to do. 3 months later, Daniel arrived at my office, unannounced. Gone was the arrogant CEO swagger. In its place was something I'd never seen in him before, humility. You didn't dismantle the hardware division, he said without preamble. You could have fired everyone, sold off the assets, absorbed the patents. But you didn't. I gestured for him to sit. That would have been inefficient. Nakamura makes excellent hardware. The problem was never the products, it was the leadership. He winced but didn't argue. I've been consulting with a startup in Boston. Medical devices, nothing glamorous, but I'm learning. Actually learning, not just pretending to know everything. But for you, he fidgeted with his watch, not the Rolex he used to wear, I noticed, but something simpler. I've been following Athena's expansion. The quantum security protocols you're developing with that Murakami girl, it's revolutionary. Sophia, I corrected. Her name is Sophia Murakami, and she's not a girl, she's the future of quantum AI architecture. Right? Sorry. He took a deep breath. I was wrong, Olivia. About you, about the company, about everything. You built something incredible, and you beat me fair and square. I leaned back, studying my brother. The past 30 months had changed him, humbled him in ways I hadn't thought possible. Why are you here, Daniel? He reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a folder. I've been developing a proposal for eye-enhanced medical diagnostics. It's nothing compared to what you're doing, but I thought maybe you'd look at it. Tell me if I'm on the right track. I accepted the folder, surprised by the gesture. You want my opinion? You who once told me my ideas were unnecessarily complex and unmarketable. He had the grace to look ashamed. I want to learn from the best. That's you, Liv. It always was. I examined his proposal, genuinely impressed by the thought he put into it. The Daniel I knew would never have done this level of research, this careful consideration of practical applications. It's not bad, I admitted. The framework needs refinement, but the core concept is solid. Relief washed over his face. Really? I tapped the folder thoughtfully. How would you feel about developing this under Athena's medical division? Not as an executive, as a project lead, starting from the ground up, earning your position like everyone else. His eyes widened. You'd give me a chance. After everything? Not give, Daniel. Offer. You'd have to work harder than you've ever worked. Take direction from people you used to consider beneath you, and prove your value every single day. A slow smile spread across his face. Not the confident smirk I was accustomed to, but something genuine. When do I start? 1 year later, Athena Intelligence had transformed the landscape of artificial intelligence. Our quantum security protocols had become the industry standard. Sophia's research team was breaking new ground in quantum neural networks. And the Nakamura hardware division, now fully integrated with our AI systems, was producing technology that outperformed every competitor. Daniel, to everyone's surprise including my own, had thrown himself into his medical ad project with unprecedented dedication. He worked alongside researchers he would once have ignored, learned from engineers he would have dismissed, and gradually earned the respect of his team. Your profile in Tech Innovator just hit the stands, Elena announced, dropping a magazine on my desk. The cover showed me standing in our quantum research lab, Sophia beside me, under the headline, The Intelligence Revolution. How Olivia Nakamura redefined AI while shattering Silicon Valley's glass ceiling. Elena grinned. The sidebar about our mentorship program is getting lots of attention online. The Athena Accelerator, my passion project. It provided funding, mentorship, and resources to young women and non-binary individuals in STEM fields, particularly those focused on artificial intelligence. My father would have called it a distraction from our core business. In reality, it had become our greatest talent pipeline. Dr. Nakamura, my assistant, called over the intercom. Your mother is here. She entered carrying a familiar wooden box. The one that had sat on my father's desk for as long as I could remember. The one that had held his most important documents, including the succession plans that had excluded me. I found these while going through your father's personal storage, she said, placing the box on my desk. Letters he wrote but never sent. This one has your name on it. I opened the envelope, recognizing my father's precise handwriting. Asterisk Olivia, asterisk. Asterisk, by the time you read this, I will likely be gone. Perhaps that's for the best, as I lack the courage to admit my failures to you directly, asterisk. Asterisk, I was wrong. About you, about the company's future, about what leadership truly means. I watched you develop innovations I couldn't begin to comprehend, yet I clung to outdated traditions that said a daughter couldn't lead, asterisk. Asterisk, my own father would be ashamed of me. He didn't build Nakamura for status or tradition. He built it to create technology that changed lives. You understand this in ways Daniel never will, asterisk. Asterisk, I've made arrangements with my attorneys. The succession plan has been modified. It may cause turmoil, but the company deserves the leader it needs, not the one tradition dictates, asterisk. Asterisk, I hope someday you can forgive my blindness, asterisk. Asterisk, with pride and regret, asterisk. Asterisk, father, asterisk. I stared at the letter, dated just 2 weeks before his unexpected death. The modifications he mentioned had never materialized. His attorneys had never executed whatever changes he planned. He was going to change his will, my mother confirmed quietly, to make you CEO. He died before the papers were finalized. I carefully folded the letter, emotions I couldn't name washing through me. It doesn't matter now. No, she agreed. You've built something far greater than he could have imagined. Later that afternoon, I visited Daniel in the medical research lab. He was deep in conversation with his team, reviewing neural imaging algorithms with an intensity I once would have thought impossible for him. The board approved your project's expansion, I told him after his team dispersed. The clinical trials can begin next quarter. His face lit up. Thank you, Olivia. You won't regret it. I know. I handed him a copy of the Tech Innovator article. They mentioned your medical ad platform as one of our most promising innovations. He skimmed the article, then looked up with genuine admiration. You did it, Liv. Everything Father said you couldn't do. You did it anyway. We did it, I corrected. The company is stronger with both of us contributing in the right ways. Daniel shook his head ruefully. You know what I realized recently? When Father said women don't belong in tech leadership, he wasn't just wrong about you, he was wrong about leadership itself. It's not about gender or tradition. It's about vision. I finished. About building something that matters. About recognizing talent wherever you find it. He nodded. Thanks for teaching me that, even if your method was dramatic. I smiled, thinking of the day I'd taken control of our family's company. Some lessons leave scars, Daniel, but if they heal properly, they make you stronger. In my office, alongside my degrees and patents, hangs my termination letter from Nakamura Technologies, a reminder of where I started. But surrounding it are photographs that represent something far more significant. Sofia presenting her quantum research at CERN. Elena accepting the Turing Award. Daniel with his medical AI team celebrating their first successful diagnostic protocol. And a new family photo taken at Athena's headquarters where tradition has been replaced by innovation, where legacy is measured not by names but by impact, and where the future is being built by people once told they didn't belong. My father was wrong. Women do run tech companies, and sometimes they transform entire industries in the process. The day I walked away from a 7-figure career started like any other, with me failing someone I loved. Again. My father's doctor had called at dawn, his voice carefully measured as he described the experimental treatment. It's our best option now, Mr. Park. But we need you geared to authorize it. Tuesday morning. Tuesday, the exact day the Richardson merger was scheduled to finalize. 3 years of work, countless all-nighters, the partnership that awaited me just beyond the horizon, all culminating in a meeting I couldn't miss. Or so I thought. Absolutely not, Daniel. The board meeting is in 3 days, and the Richardson merger documents need your final review. Marcus Chen's voice cut through the office like a blade, his titanium watch catching the afternoon light as he gestured dismissively. I stood before his glass desk, medical leave request in hand, feeling my shoulders tense. Mr. Chen, it's my father. The doctors are saying this might be our last chance, though. Your father has been dying for months, Marcus interrupted, his expression unchanged. Somehow the company has managed to continue functioning during your frequent absences. The words stung more than they should have. My father, once the picture of health, had been declining steadily since his stroke 8 months ago. Every medical leave request had become increasingly difficult to obtain, with Marcus growing more impatient each time. This is different, I said, keeping my voice steady. The experimental treatment starts Tuesday. If I'm not there to authorize it and something goes wrong, then perhaps your sister could handle it? Or one of your many cousins. Marcus leaned back in his ergonomic chair, fingers steepled. We're in the final stages of the biggest merger in this firm's history. Your father was a businessman. He would understand priorities. I felt something shift inside me. My father was a businessman who never missed a single family dinner in 30 years of running his company. He would absolutely not understand. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Careful, Daniel. I've been very accommodating, but my patience has limits. 3 days, I said firmly. I'll have my phone. I'll review the documents remotely. I just need to be physically present for my father. The Richardson family is flying in specifically to meet our entire executive team. Marcus stood, his 6'3" frame imposing by design. Your absence would be noticed, and in this business, appearances matter. The answer is no. I looked down at the leave request in my hands, then at the photo on my desk visible through the glass wall of Marcus's office. My father and me at my law school graduation, both beaming with pride. Then I quit. The words left my mouth before I fully processed them. But once spoken, I felt an unexpected wave of relief. Marcus actually laughed, a short, sharp sound. Don't be dramatic, Daniel. No one quits Thornwick and Chen over family matters. I placed my company badge on his desk. I just did. You're throwing away a partnership track, Marcus said, his amusement fading. For what? To hold your father's hand? He's going to die whether you're there or not. I shouldered my bag, suddenly eager to be anywhere but there. That's the point, Marcus. He's going to die, and I'm going to be there. Some things aren't negotiable. Walk out that door, and don't bother asking for a reference, Marcus called after me, his voice rising. In fact, I'll personally make sure every law firm in the city knows about your priorities. I turned back one last time. Thank you for clarifying mine. I cleared my desk in less than 10 minutes, taking only my personal items and leaving behind the expensive fountain pen Marcus had given me when I made senior associate. Rachel from Human Resources hovered nearby, clearly uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Daniel, she whispered as I packed my framed diplomas. You know how he gets during big deals. I do, I agreed, not looking up. That's why I can't stay. The elevator ride to the lobby felt like descending from one world into another. Outside the gleaming skyscraper that had consumed the last 7 years of my life, the spring air felt startlingly fresh. I loosened my tie, hailed a cab, and gave the driver my father's address. My father's home, my childhood home, sat on a quiet street lined with oak trees just beginning to show their spring leaves. It was modest compared to what many of his colleagues owned, but he had always said a bigger house just meant more rooms to clean. What mattered was filling the space you had with things that mattered. Mrs. Abernathy, the home health nurse, opened the door before I could use my key. Daniel, we weren't expecting you until the weekend. Her kind face registered surprise, then concern. Is everything all right? It is now, I said, setting down my box of office belongings. How is he today? Lucid. He had a good morning. He's in the sunroom. I found my father in his wheelchair by the windows, a chessboard set up before him, playing against himself as sunlight streamed across the polished pieces. At 72, Howard Park still had a full head of silver hair and the straight posture of the federal judge he had once been. The stroke had weakened his left side and slurred his speech, but his mind remained razor sharp. Dad. He looked up, his face brightening. Daniel. What a surprise. Each word came deliberately, hard-won. No suit today. I glanced down, realizing I was still in my office clothes. Actually, I just left the office. At 2 in the afternoon, his right eyebrow rose, a familiar gesture from my childhood that usually preceded a lecture. I pulled up a chair across from him. I quit. My father's hand paused over a black night. Thornwick and Chen. When I nodded, he asked simply, why? The Richardson merger is happening this week. Marcus wouldn't approve my leave for your treatment. Dad frowned. So you quit a partnership track position at one of the top firms in the city. I did. Good. His response caught me off guard. Good. Marcus Chen, my father said carefully, each syllable precise, has been sacrificing other people's lives for his ambition since law school. I always wondered when you would notice. I stared at him. You knew Marcus in law school. You never said anything when I took the job. Some lessons, he replied with a small smile, cannot be taught. Only learned. He moved his knight, capturing a white pawn. What will you do now? Be here for your treatment. Then, I don't know. Find another firm, maybe? My father studied the board. Or you could open that legal aid clinic you talked about in law school. Before Thornwick and Chen seduced you with their starting salary. I felt a flush of embarrassment that he remembered a dream I had all but forgotten. That was idealistic student talk. Was it? He gestured to a folder on the side table. Open that. Inside was a deed to a small commercial building downtown, dated just 3 months ago, along with incorporation papers for Park Community Legal Services. I don't understand. I bought it after my diagnosis. He tapped his temple. Stroke didn't affect my real estate instincts. Good location. Near the courthouse. Dad, you can't just. I trailed off, leafing through the documents with growing disbelief. Can't just what? Spend my money how I please. I'm dying, Daniel. We both know it, even with this treatment. You don't have that. I protested automatically. He fixed me with the same steady gaze that had assessed countless witnesses. I was planning to tell you after the merger. I thought you deserved to finish what you started. But now, he gestured to the folder. Maybe it's time. I set the papers down, overwhelmed. I don't know the first thing about running a legal aid clinic. Nonsense. You've been doing pro bono work for years. Those immigrant cases, the tenant disputes. He moved another chess piece. You think I don't read your emails? You've been reading my emails. Mrs. Abernathy helps me with the computer. Don't look so shocked. How else would I know what's happening in your life? You're always too busy to talk about work. The last phrase came with a knowing look. I couldn't argue with that. Our Sunday dinners had become increasingly brief, with me constantly checking my phone for emails from Marcus. I always thought I'd have more time, I admitted quietly, to figure out what I really wanted, to spend time with you, to do work that actually matters. Time, my father said, his voice suddenly weaker, is the one thing money cannot buy. Trust me, I've tried. He gestured to the chessboard. Your move. The next morning, I drove my father to the hospital for his treatment. As we waited for the doctor, I scrolled through dozens of messages from former colleagues expressing shock at my departure. Some were supportive, others clearly fishing for gossip. Marcus had apparently told the office I'd had a breakdown due to personal stress. It was easier than admitting someone had chosen family over the firm. Dr. Mirza arrived with her team, explaining the experimental procedure one more time. The treatment was new, with promising results for stroke recovery, but not without risks. As my father's medical proxy, I needed to sign the final authorization. Are you ready, Mr. Park? She asked him. My father reached for my hand with his good one. We both are. The procedure took 6 hours. I sat in the waiting room, alternating between researching legal aid clinic management on my laptop and fielding increasingly angry messages from Marcus about files I'd allegedly left unfinished. I blocked his number after the third threat of legal action. When Dr. Mirza finally emerged, her expression was cautiously optimistic. The procedure went well. We won't know the full effects for a few days, but your father's vitals remained strong throughout. Recovery was slow but steady. By the end of the week, while the Richardson merger was dominating legal news headlines, my father was showing small improvements in his left side mobility. I spent days at the hospital and nights researching everything I needed to know about running a nonprofit legal service. 2 weeks later, I stood outside the building my father had purchased. It was a narrow 3-story structure sandwiched between a coffee shop and a bookstore, just 3 blocks from the county courthouse. The brick facade needed cleaning, and the interior required significant renovation, but I could see its potential. My phone rang. Rachel from HR. Daniela, I thought you should know, she said without preamble. The Richardson merger fell apart yesterday. What? How? Their legal team found inconsistencies in the documentation. Marcus is blaming everyone, especially you. He's saying you sabotaged the deal by leaving critical sections unfinished. I had done no such thing, but Marcus would never admit to his own oversights. I'm sorry for everyone there. I know how hard the team worked. That's not all, Rachel continued, lowering her voice. Judith Richardson specifically asked where you were. Apparently, her son is facing criminal charges in a DUI case. And she remembered you had criminal defense experience. She wanted you specifically. I leaned against the building, my building feeling a complex mix of emotions. Did Marcus tell her I quit? He told her you were on temporary leave. Daniel, Rachel hesitated. A lot of us are reconsidering our positions here. The way he handled this, blaming everyone else. There are other firms, Rachel, better ones. Or other options entirely, she replied. I heard about your father's building. Rumors travel fast. After we hung up, I unlocked the front door and stepped inside my future. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light from the tall windows. The space was empty except for a single desk in the center with a note propped against an old brass lamp. For when you're ready to make your own light. Dad. I set my bag down and pulled out my laptop. There was work to do. 6 months later, Park Community Legal Services opened its doors. My father sat beside me at the ribbon cutting. His mobility improved enough that he now used a cane instead of a wheelchair. The experimental treatment hadn't been a miracle cure, but it had given him back some independence and us more time. Our staff was small but committed. Myself, Rachel, who had indeed left Thornwick, and Chen, a recent law school graduate named Miguel who reminded me of myself before corporate law had narrowed my vision and a paralegal named Diana, who had previously worked at the public defender's office. Our first clients were primarily tenants facing eviction, immigrants navigating the complex legal system, and elderly residents dealing with predatory financial schemes. The work was demanding, the hours long, and the pay significantly less than what I had earned before. But each night, I went home tired in a way that felt right. The fatigue of meaningful work. 3 months after our opening, Judith Richardson walked through our door. "Mr. Park," she said, extending her hand. "I've been looking for you." I showed her to my modest office, a far cry from the corner view at Thornwick and Chen. "How can I help you, Mrs. Richardson?" My son's legal troubles were resolved, thankfully, she said, settling into the chair across from me. But it made me realize how quickly fortune can turn. My family has been blessed with considerable wealth, but not everyone has access to quality legal representation when they need it most. I nodded, uncertain where this was going. "The Richardson Foundation would like to establish an endowment," she continued, "for Park Community Legal Services, to ensure its continued operation and possible expansion." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. "That's extremely generous, Mrs. Richardson. May I ask why specifically?" "We're very new." She smiled. "My father began as a legal aid attorney before building our family business. He never forgot those early days, helping people who had nowhere else to turn." She reached into her bag and withdrew a check. "Consider this our investment in justice. The amount written on the check would ensure our clinic's operation for years to come." That evening, I brought the news and a bottle of champagne to my father's house. He listened as I explained the Richardson endowment, his eyes brightening with each detail. "You see," he said after I finished, "the universe has its own justice system." "How do you mean?" "The merger that Marcus wouldn't let you leave for, the one that ultimately failed, brought you the very thing you need to succeed." He chuckled. "Poetic, isn't it?" Later, as we sat in the same sunroom where he had revealed his plans for the clinic, my father grew serious. "I need to tell you something, Daniel. Something I should have said sooner." I set down my glass. "What is it?" "I wasn't entirely truthful about why I bought that building." He adjusted his position, wincing slightly. "Before my stroke, I was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Dad, the stroke came before the Alzheimer's could progress noticeably. Strange blessing that," he smiled wryly. "But I knew what was coming. I'd watched my own father disappear bit by bit. I couldn't bear the thought of you witnessing that while trapped in a job that was already taking you away from yourself. So the clinic was as much for you as for the community. I needed to know you'd be doing something that mattered to you when I could no longer remember what mattered to me." He reached for my hand. "Promise me something. Anything. When the time comes, and it will, stroke or Alzheimer's or simply old age, remember that a legacy isn't built in boardrooms. It's built in moments of choice. When you choose courage over convenience, purpose over profit." "I promise," I said, my voice thick. 1 year to the day after I walked out of Thornwick and Chen, I stood before a packed courtroom, representing a group of seniors fighting eviction from their longtime homes to make way for luxury condominiums. The developer was represented by none other than Marcus Chen himself. As I presented our case, I caught sight of my father sitting in the back row, leaning on his cane but sitting tall, watching with unmistakable pride. Beside him sat Judith Richardson, who had become not just our benefactor but a fierce advocate for our work. Marcus avoided my gaze throughout the proceedings, his focus entirely on his expensive leather portfolio and his team of 4 associates. When the judge ruled in our client's favor, granting an injunction that would protect their homes while the full case proceeded, the courtroom erupted in applause. My father's voice somehow carried above the rest. "That's my son." As the courtroom cleared, Marcus finally approached me. "Interesting career move, Daniel," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "I wouldn't have predicted this." "Neither would I, once upon a time." He glanced toward my father, who was chatting animatedly with Mrs. Richardson. "I hear he's doing well. The treatment worked." "It helped," I acknowledged. "He has good days and bad." Marcus nodded, seeming genuinely pleased. Then his gaze sharpened. "Judith Richardson has taken quite an interest in your little operation. She believes in equal access to justice." "As do we all," he replied smoothly. "In fact, Thornwick and Chen has been considering expanding our pro bono program." Perhaps there's room for collaboration. I studied the man who had once held such power over my professional life. Are you offering a partnership, Marcus? An alliance, your expertise, our resources. Think about it. He handed me his card, as if I didn't still have his number memorized. I will, I said, though we both knew what my answer would be. My father joined me as Marcus departed, watching him weave through the crowd. What did he want? To offer a deal he knows I'll refuse, so he can tell himself he tried. Dad nodded approvingly. You've learned well. He gazed around the emptying courtroom. You know, I sat in courtrooms like this for 40 years, believing I was serving justice from the bench. But watching you today, he squeezed my shoulder. This is justice too. Perhaps the kind that matters most. Outside the courthouse, our clients gathered around us, elderly men and women whose relief was palpable. Mrs. Diaz, their unofficial spokesperson at 87, clasped my hands in hers. My husband and I worked our whole lives for that little apartment, she said, eyes bright with tears. We raised our children there, celebrated 50 anniversaries there. How do you thank someone for saving your home? You don't need to thank me, I told her. This is exactly why we exist. That night, as my father and I sat on his porch watching fireflies rise from the lawn, I realized something profound. In walking away from what I thought was success, I had stumbled into something far more valuable: purpose. My father seemed to read my thoughts. When I was diagnosed, he said, I was terrified of losing everything that made me who I am. My memories, my independence, my sense of purpose. He looked at me, his eyes clear and present. But I've realized that the most important parts of us live on in what we create, in who we help, in the choices we make when everything is on the line. I thought about the clinic, about Mrs. Diaz and her neighbors, about the dozens of clients waiting for help, about Rachel and Miguel and Diana, who had chosen the same path, about how walking away from Thornwick and Chen had felt like an ending but had actually been a beginning. The price of legacy, my father continued, isn't measured in billable hours or corner offices. It's measured in the lives we touch, the wrongs we right, the courage we show when it would be easier to look away. A year ago, I had stood in Marcus Chen's office, believing I was sacrificing my future. Now I understood. I hadn't sacrificed a future. I had reclaimed it. Thank you, I said simply, for showing me what matters. My father smiled, reached for my hand, and together we watched as more fireflies rose from the gathering darkness, their light small but undeniable against the vast night.